Hi, I'm Serena Patel. I'm the author of Pia's Pet Club. Stay tuned to the Voice It Out podcast.
Hi, it's Amrita, and you are listening or watching the Voice It Out podcast. And today's episode is our first author. Should I say is with our first author? It's Serena Patel, who has recently written a very interesting book called Pia's Pet Club, Puppy Problem. And I know what you're thinking, and it is a children's book. That's why it's a title like that. Hi, Serena.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Serena, first thing I have to ask you, what led you here and to this book?
It's been quite a long journey, actually. We started talking about Pia's Pet Club as an idea about 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it was a lot of sort of playing with the idea, thinking about what a pet club might look like. And yeah, it's taken a long time. New series tend to take slightly longer because you're creating the setting, you're thinking about what all the characters might look like and sound like and feel like. And there's a lot of sort of world building that goes into that. So yeah, it's been a long old journey.
I didn't expect that it would take that long, actually, for even any kind of book. But 3 years, I think it is a long time. But I wanted to ask you, this book, like you said, is about pets. Why did you make it about that particular topic?
So I'd been writing the Anisha Accidental Detective series, and in that series there's always been animals. One of the characters particularly has a love of animals and knows a lot about animals and is always befriending every stray, and he's just always taking strays in, and it kind of felt like a natural progression. And my editors had spoken to me about writing something a bit more kind of pet focused, and I wasn't sure whether that was something I could do. I didn't know what that would look like. I don't think any of us did really at that point. But at the same time, my son would have been about 9, and he was doing a really kind of strong campaign for why we should get pets. And we had a goldfish, we'd had a hamster, and he was sort of angling for something bigger. And he was doing his research. He really did his homework on this one. He was sending me PowerPoint presentations. He was writing lists. He was sending me links to websites. He was watching pet shows with me, getting me to sit down and watch pet shows with him. And he went through the whole range of animals. He wanted a chinchilla. He wanted a guinea pig.
Wow.
He wanted a snake. He wanted a tarantula. He wanted a lizard, a gecko. We went through every pet you could imagine. And eventually we settled on getting a cat. Okay. And so this was all going on while I was developing the idea for Pia's Pet Club. And I just started thinking about, rather than just a book that is about a child who has a pet, what about a child who really wants a pet but isn't allowed one for various reasons? And what does that look like and what does that feel like? Because I could really see how passionate he was about it and how determined he was to convince me. And I thought there must be so many children out there like that. Yeah. And actually, when I go into schools and I ask the children, who's got a pet? And you'll get sort of half of the room put their hands up. And then you ask, who doesn't have a pet but really wants one? And it's everybody else in the room. So it feels like something that's quite relatable for children of that age. And as I've sort of written more and more of it, I kind of feel like I think it's going to resonate quite a bit.
There are quite a few themes that you've kind of intertwined in the actual main kind of narrative. Mm-hmm. And I think, as we spoke about kind of off camera, there is a very strong South Asian representation, obviously, because Pia is an Asian family. But what I found really interesting, especially at the start of your book, is you kind of already say what's really obvious, that Asian families are not known to have pets.
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting to kind of put in at the beginning to kind of give the context of this is where this girl is at and this is why she's got so much convincing to do.
Yes.
So I think obviously, as you've explained, that kind of came from your son as well, who was doing that at the same time that you were developing the story. But at the same time, why did you think it was important to give that context?
I think because, growing up, I didn't know any South Asian families that had pets. It just wasn't something we did in our culture, really. Yeah. I never had a pet, and none of my friends ever had them. So I guess as a mum now, like I've wanted to give my children that experience of having a pet, because I think it was a great thing that I was able to do for them, taught them some responsibility, and they were very, keen to have pets. That was something they really wanted. So I've been really lucky that I can give that to them. But there's lots of reasons why people don't have pets. And in South Asian culture, it historically hasn't been something that we do. I think that's changing now. Mm-hmm. Like I know a lot of people who have cats or dogs. So I think it was just kind of explaining like, why is it like this? And actually there are more reasons than that. When you kind of get into the book, you realise that mum is very weird about pets, and we don't quite know straight away why she's weird about pets. And dad's just a bit kind of dismissive of it. He's like, oh no, that's not for us. Like, can't have pets in the building. So it's just kind of giving that extra layer really, I suppose. And I think a lot of parents will recognise that from their own childhoods as well. So, hopefully it kind of resonates on different levels.
No, I did think it was really interesting that you said that from the get-go, so that, like I said, you get the mindset already that she's got so much of a fight ahead of her to kind of get a pet. I also wanted to ask you about, at the beginning of Pia's Pet Club, you also explained that she's in a broken in a very inverted commas word. She's come from a broken family. Her mum and dad have separated. And that was also part of the battle that she had, because she had two separate households in a way to convince. But also I found it really interesting that there was one part where I read where you had said, Mum always says that I don't really understand things. Mm-hmm. And I found that really interesting, because I feel like that is something that kind of we've all grown up with as well, because it's not so much one certain parent saying we don't understand. It's sometimes just the idea that the child won't understand.
Yes.
And I think that is also a South Asian thing. Personally, I feel like that is seen more as South Asian kind of culture thing rather than any other culture. So again, these kind of little things that you've weaved in, I think is quite interesting. But at the same time, you've kind of written it in the first person. So it's also very personal to Pia. So what made you write it in the first person? Basically, that's what I want to ask you, because I feel it gives a very different feel to it.
So my first books were all written in first person, and I think it's just always felt like the most natural way for me as a writer to tell the story. I think I am probably a little bit too much in touch with my inner child. So I try and see the story through the child's eyes and what it feels like to be a child. And there's so much that's frustrating about that, adults don't think I'm going to understand. I'm not old enough to do this. They're always telling me no. And I just try and get that across, I guess, because I think, when we read a book, we want to feel seen. We want to feel like we belong, and like somebody else understands what we're going through and what our frustrations are. I think that's a big part of childhood. So I guess I just try and write the book that I would have liked to have read, that somebody gets it, and so that's where it's coming from really. And, hopefully I do a good job of that. I listen a lot to my children and, their perspectives on things, because I think I remember what it was like for me, but that was about a million years ago now. So, they live in a very different world to the one we grew up in. So I really try and listen to what their frustrations are and try and kind of read between the lines and put that into my stories, because I think and hope that will help somebody that's reading it.
No, I'm sure it will. I think it's the way that you've written it. I think it will definitely resonate for younger people. But also, how much of you have you put in that? Because you've said you've listened to your kids. How much of you is in this story? Or is there not much?
Probably a lot. I think I've always written as a form of therapy. Yeah. I think it's, I've always had a lot going on in my brain. I think writing was always a way for me to process the world and what was going on in it. And so I always kept a diary. I wrote poetry. I was always writing something. So I think when I'm writing my stories, although they are stories and they're fiction and there's a lot of humour in them and occasionally there's a mystery or, whatever it might be going on, I think on the emotional level, I think I probably pour in quite a lot of myself into that, and perhaps how I felt as a child or, how I would feel. So, yeah, definitely. I think the emotions, I really tap into, I suppose.
I think that's really interesting that you have been able to put that much, like you say, but also kind of give it a tribute almost to how your children might feel or someone of a similar age would feel. I just wanted to ask, actually, because this is obviously the target audience is young people, how do you think that this would resonate with someone who is not of an Asian culture because the protagonist is of an Asian culture? It's kind of a backhanded question because obviously when I was growing up, I didn't really see that, but I still identified with stories that were of a different culture. So this is kind of almost a backhanded question about how do you think people will kind of see themselves in this, even though this character is South Asian?
Yeah, so I think my experience, so I've been published for 5 years now, and, you know, my experience with the Anisha series was really overwhelmingly positive. That was one of my worries, that, you know, are people going to see this as a book just for South Asians? And that didn't happen. And I think the characters have relatable characteristics and personality traits that any child can see themselves in. And I think there's, you know, that even in the family kind of setups, there'll be things that children will say, oh, my mum's a bit like that, or my dad's a bit like that, or, you know, I've got a granny like that. And so I think there's the kind of themes of family, I guess, are universal. The themes of friendship and the stuff we go through with our friends, they're universal as well. School life, home life, you know, those things, every kid is going to find something in there to relate to. And that's what I found overwhelmingly, is that all children, you know, no matter where they're from, have found something that they've liked about the story, that they found interesting. So that's, you know, that's been really lovely for me as a writer to see.
Of course. And obviously your journey as a writer, I wanted to ask you, did you always aspire to be a writer? Because obviously, this is another South Asian thing. We don't always want to be in these creative fields. I think when I was younger, I don't think I knew anyone in a creative field. And if you were to tell kind of your parents or anyone in your family, oh, I want to be a writer, absolutely shut down. No, be an accountant. And I mean that in jest, but I also mean that very truthfully, because that's the response we would get, right? Did you always want to be a writer, firstly, but also did you find any resistance from the people around you? Not in so much a bad way, but just resistance that maybe made you push harder, I guess? So
I think I always loved writing. I always had my head in a book, always loved books. I don't think I aspired to be a children's author at that age because I didn't think I could be one. I think I'd already kind of written it off in my mind because, you know, I often say when I go on school visits, like, we never had anything like this. Authors almost were not like real people. They were a name on a book cover because you couldn't connect with them in the way that we can now. You know, I joke when I go into schools, but I say we didn't have the internet, you know.
No, we didn't. It's so true.
Which makes me sound really ancient, but we did not have the internet. You couldn't Google an author. You couldn't email them. You couldn't follow them on social media. None of that stuff existed. So you couldn't connect with them in the same kind of immediate way that you can now. And we didn't have school visits. So, you know, if authors were doing visits, they definitely never came to my little school in the middle of Walsall in the West Midlands. Like, that just didn't happen. Yeah. And I was reading everything I could get my hands on. You know, we were going to the library religiously, but I didn't come across characters who looked like me in books. I didn't come across authors who looked like me. I never came across an author who had the same last name as mine or similar. I never really came across an author who was from the West Midlands. And so I guess subconsciously the message I got loud and clear was people like me don't do that job. And as you say about creative careers and kind of what you were encouraged to be by older people in your family, creative careers were not valued at all. And I remember having a conversation with somebody in my family and saying, I would like to be a journalist. Like I used to make up my own newspapers at home and I'd write about things that were interesting. And I was told, you don't want to do that. You won't make any money doing that. Go and be a lawyer. And that shut me down like immediately. And I think in my probably 10, 11-year-old mind, I just kind of accepted what I was told and went, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. That's not going to be possible for me. And so I always wrote secretly, didn't really show anybody because I also thought I might not be very good. I had huge imposter syndrome, still do. And so it was a combination of the two things. Like, this, you can't make that happen. Don't be stupid. Like, you know, it's like me saying I want to go and play in the World Cup. Like, it's not going to happen. Don't even say it out loud because people are going to laugh at you. So I just didn't. It was not something I ever expressed out loud. It was much, much later. It was after I had my children. It was as an adult, I reflected and kind of thought about representation in books, and it really became, it's almost like a light went on. And I think as a child, not seeing yourself in books, you just accept what is in front of you. That's just how it is, right? There's no brown people on TV. We're not in the media. We're not in books. We're kind of invisible. But that's normal. You know, we are, I mean, I went to a primary school where I was the only brown child in the entire primary school. Okay. So I was used to being other. I was used to not fitting in. Oh. So to me, I guess, not seeing yourself in books, you're not in creative careers, that's normal. That's just how it is. Just accept it and move on. And I think as well in South Asian culture, it's very, when I was growing up, it was very much keep your head down, work hard, don't complain, don't, you know, that kind of energy, like just don't make a fuss. So I grew up with that mentality, and it wasn't until I was a parent and I started thinking about what kind of life I want for my children and wanting them to love books. You know, they didn't get a choice. They're going to love books. They're my children. They will love reading.
I love that.
You know, and then starting to look at books and think, hang on, there's no books with South Asian main characters. What's going on? And then kind of thinking, well, you know what? Like, I love writing and I really want to do this. And I just got to a point where I thought, if I don't do this now, I don't want to look back and regret that I didn't try. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I really, you know, if you'd have asked me at that point, do you think you're going to publish a book? No. Like, I'm going to try, but no, not really. And, you know, I just kind of went for it and gave it a go.
I really respect that, because I think as a South Asian woman, who obviously you said the light had gone on, but you'd had children, you know, you'd had the whole journey of that, and then you still thought to yourself, no, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit of a rebel.
I think it's amazing that you did that, because I think a lot of South Asian women kind of just, in a way, just accept what's there, what they've got, and don't seem to put, I you know, this is a very kind of me thing, but I feel like I see a lot of people kind of just settling. And what you did is you looked at yourself and you looked back and be like, no, I'm going to regret this. I'm going to go for it. And whichever way it goes, right? And thankfully it's come here. So I need to ask you, actually, as you said that, you know, we didn't see a lot of South Asian representation on TV or in books or anything back in our day, should I say. Now, I think that it's very different.
Yes.
It's so different. You see kind of Asian characters as protagonists in TV series, or, you know, just even in kind of not kind of protagonist role, but a really important supportive role or something like that. And I think it's really different for the generation of today who are growing up to when we were growing up. However, do you think that, because this book is obviously aimed at young people, do you think that there needs to be more, or do you think that there needs to be a certain kind of representation as opposed to more?
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful, because sometimes there are books that are made to have representation in them, and I feel like it's token representation. And I think if you're gonna have a book that includes representation, I think you need to do it properly. And there's so many different ways to represent a group of people, isn't there? You know, one of the things I was worried about when my very first book came out was, you know, am I trying to represent an entire culture of people here? Like, that's a big weight to carry, and I'm probably not going to get it right. So I think you can only write the story that, you know, is true to you. And that's what I've tried to do. I don't try and, you know, claim to be representing everybody, or, you know, so I try and write the story that is true for me and that reflects my experience and the experience of my family and things, you know, the things that I know, I guess. I think there can always be more, and it would be lovely to see more. I see a lot of books now that do have diverse representation in them, but it's very kind of one-dimensional, if that makes sense. So, for example, having a character of colour in a book is brilliant, but if we never refer to any other kind of facet of their culture or of what makes them them, then I feel like it's just there for the sake of it. And I see that a lot. And that kind of brings me down a bit, if I'm honest, because I think we can do more. Like, we can do better than that. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes,
there,
you have. You totally have. Actually leads me to the next question, actually. I understand completely what you mean, because sometimes it does feel like a tick box in a way.
Yeah.
That, we've represented this group of people. But when you were writing your 2 books that you've written, and you said you felt the weight of if you're representing the entire culture, and I can totally understand that. But when did it kind of dawn on you that actually this is an entire culture, but it's a snapshot of this particular character or this particular family or this particular time in the person's life? When did it actually become comfortable, basically?
I don't know. I mean, does it ever? I don't know. I think I've just got better at not being so hard on myself. And, I know I'm not going to get everything right all the time. I think what my publisher is really great at is we have a sensitivity reader for all my books. And so I think that's really important in publishing when you're, publishing books that have diverse representation. I think sensitivity readers are a must, because although I am South Asian, I don't know everything about the culture. I might say something that's incorrect or offensive, and I don't want to do that. So, it's important to have that extra layer of a check of somebody else who knows. But yeah, I think I've just got better at just trying to write the story I know. Again, this is the culture that I know, this is my experience of it, and appreciating that. I think, to kind of go off on a tangent, but when I was growing up, I think I had and maybe it was influenced by the older people in my family, but it was very like, okay, this is what it is to be South Asian. This is what it is to be Gujarati. This is what it is to be Punjabi. And this is how you do it. And there's only one right way. And
I totally identify with that.
So for me, I think as I've got older and perhaps, making friends from different cultures, seeing that people do things in different ways. They can be from the same place in India and they'll have totally different ways of doing things, totally different ways of making the food. They'll have different types of rituals in their religious ceremonies, and that's kind of, again, like flicked a light on for me, like, hang on a minute. There's not just one way to be South Asian, there's so many different ways. So I think that also has kind of been a bit freeing for me when I'm writing, that it's okay, like, this is your experience of being South Asian, somebody else's experience. They might see something that they relate to and they go, oh yeah, like, we have parathas, then somebody else might be like, oh, we don't do it like that, but it's all right, because, we're all different in our own ways and we can do things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I hear you saying, I think you kind of just accepted. It's a form of acceptance, right? That even though we might have known one way when we were growing up, and that's because it is often because of the upbringing that we have, and that's no detriment to anyone older member of the family or anything like that. That's what they know, and that's eventually what they're going to show us, I guess.
Yeah.
I think in this day and age, as you've said, it is okay to be diverse from what you know. But I wanted to ask you, in your writing journey, did that acceptance ever become kind of loneliness, I guess? Because even though your writing represented something that your child might be going through or something that you've experienced, was there ever a point where you thought, I'm actually a bit lonely, like, doing the writing, actually, when you were actually developing the story?
No, actually. I think because I've got such a supportive team, often people say, is it lonely being a writer? Because you don't have like a communal office to go to where you're with your colleagues. But I think the team that I have at my publishers, I think they're just brilliant, and they just are always there at the end of the phone or ready to jump on a Zoom or, so I don't think in the sort of 7 years now that I've been with my publisher, I don't think I've ever once felt like I'm doing this alone. It's very much a team effort. I always say, like, writing books, often we only think about the person who wrote it or maybe the person that illustrated it. And it takes such a big team of people to make this happen. Like, if I didn't have that team supporting me, it would still just be words on my laptop. It wouldn't be a real book that children can pick up and read. So I don't ever really feel alone. I always feel like I'm part of this really big team, you know, and I'm just doing my bit and they're all doing their bits. And if they, you know, if even one person didn't do their bit, the book wouldn't happen. So I'm very kind of grateful for that process, I suppose.
That's really refreshing to hear. And I'm glad you've not experienced the loneliness. I wanted to ask you, how do you kind of, you've mentioned you still have imposter syndrome, as you said, you've experienced it and you still have it. And also, you've also spoken about acceptance, or just how you kind of thought about your own childhood and kind of related it to now, I guess. How do you kind of overcome those kind of negative, if they are negative? I think imposter syndrome to me can be quite negative feelings. And what do you do to look after your mental health?
I think the last few years I've been on a bit of a journey with my mental health. I think the imposter syndrome has been there, I think, probably all my life. I think I've always struggled with it. And, you know, I think I've just got better at recognising it. And I read something today, actually, that said, remember, your thoughts are not facts. And I was like, that's so true. Yeah. Like, you know, our brains often lie to us and tell us all sorts of terrible things about us. And we have an inclination to go, yeah, you know, oh God, yeah, that's true. But it's not. And so, you know, and on the other side of that, you know, when people would tell me I've done something good, I wouldn't believe them. And I think they're just saying that, you know. When I got my publishing deal, I was like, somebody's made a mistake here. They are going to call me and they're going to be like, we're really sorry, but we didn't mean to sign you. Like... It's not happening. Oh no. So for ages, you know, until I actually saw the book published, I was convinced this is not going to happen. I'm never going to see my book in. There's been some sort of huge error somewhere. Someone's done a clerical error. So I think I have always had that inclination to believe that, you know, I'm not good enough, or, you know, people are kind of just saying it to be nice, you know, but I think I've got better at just trying to just stop a minute and just think about it. You know, just take a step back and just think about what it is that's actually going on. And that's taken me a long time. That's taken me it's taken me my whole life. You know, I'm 46 now and it's taken me till now to figure that out. But yeah, I just try and take a pause. I do stuff that I know is relaxing for me. So, you know, if I've been really busy with just running around a lot, I know I need an afternoon just on the sofa with a warm blanket. I've got my heated blanket and it's just like the best thing I ever bought. And so that and a cup of tea, you know, I'm happy. I think it's doing those things that you know will help you to recharge. I know now that, you know, when I'm doing events, I need a day afterwards just to not do anything. I'm starting to understand myself a lot better. And I think part of that comes from having had an ADHD diagnosis a couple of years ago. And that's really helped me to accept who I am. I think I spent a huge portion of my life thinking there was something wrong with me and not understanding why I'd done certain things or why I was so emotional, or why did I feel so panicked about this, or why did my anxiety seem to just get out of control? Why was I feeling crushed by all my kind of thoughts? And just having that understanding has just given me so much. It's just been so freeing and so healing. So I think just learning about yourself and reflecting and, you know, just taking that time. And I know it's not always possible to do that. So I feel like that in itself is a privilege, having that time to do that, and being able to get the diagnosis, you know, that was a huge privilege that I was able to do that. But I feel like it's made me a better person and it's made me a better writer. And yeah, I think if you don't take the time to get to know yourself, then how do you ever look after yourself? How do you ever understand why you feel the way you feel about things? Otherwise you just, you know, for years I felt like I was just on an emotional roller coaster all the time. And every few months I would just hit a wall and just be like, I can't do anymore. You know, I'm not dealing with this very well. And just understanding that was burnout. You know.
I was just about to ask you that.
Yeah, just huge light bulb. Like, oh, okay. So I just need to take some time out and I just need to do this and I need to, you know, and just having that understanding, I think, is huge for me.
I think the reason I was going to ask you about burnout is because I feel like as women, we juggle a lot.
Yes.
Every woman, every single woman juggles a lot. And I think we also try to do a lot more than is in our capacity a lot of the time. From my personal feeling and from some of the guests who have been on this podcast already, is usually out of the guilt of something or the other. Some plate that was rolling is not going to roll anymore if we just sit down for half an hour, like you say, in your heated blanket and have a cup of tea. Something's going to go wrong in that half an hour. But realistically, it's not. It's just going to be delayed half an hour. That's basically it. And I think that is a really important message that you've given about your diagnosis as well, and how it triggered you to kind of focus on your own self, as opposed to look outside. Not that we don't look outside, but just to focus on yourself and take those moments to kind of put yourself first. Yeah,
because I think when you do that, you look around you and that enables you to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And that was something I didn't have. I didn't have any boundaries. Like, I'll just say yes to everything and I'll do anything for anybody, even to my own detriment. I'll just put everything down right now and I'll run and go and do that. And it was just so bad for me. And saying no to people was horrendous at saying no. Couldn't say no. I feel so guilty. Oh God, I can't help them. Like, you know, it was terrible. And it just, understanding myself has enabled me to set my limits and be like, okay, can't do that right now. Maybe another time I can, but right now I can't, you know, and just set that time for myself, set that time for my children. And I feel like if I show them how to set boundaries, that's going to set them up, you know, for a better life as adults, because I don't want them to see me as mum who just runs around ragged all the time, exhausted, burnt out. And then, you know, they go into their adult lives like that as well, thinking they need to do everything for everybody.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's benefited me, but it's also long term, it's going to benefit them as well.
Absolutely. And then they will see you as a wonderful author.
I don't know about that.
I'm sure they will, even if it's not there now.
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go to our end section, which is the this or that. So here we go. Are you ready? There's 6 of them, by the way.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Ready. Okay. I'm scared.
Some of them will be related, like I said, to your career. Some of them won't be.
Okay.
Okay. Picnic or barbecue?
Barbecue.
Oh, okay. Fantasy or contemporary?
Contemporary.
Cool. Nights out or nights in?
Nights in.
Really?
Yeah, I'm getting too old for nights out. Can't do nights out anymore.
No, you can't blame that on your age. You can't. Big city or small town?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Small town, I think.
Ah.
It depends, because I think small town to live in,
yeah,
big city to visit, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mentor or mentee?
Mentee, I think. I think so, yeah.
Okay. Last one, which is probably, I don't know if this is easiest. It was the easiest for me to think of.
Okay.
Reading or writing?
That's actually quite tough.
I thought that would be the easy one.
I'm going to say reading, because that's
okay.
Relaxing and that's chill time.
I love that. That's, again, another example of putting yourself first.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast, and I wish you all the best with your book and any future endeavours that you have coming.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, can you share where we find you on socials?
Yes, so I am at Serena Patel on Twitter. I am also on Instagram and Facebook under the same handles. And I'm also on Threads, if anybody's on Threads.
Oh,
it's a new
Instagram's
one.
Threads. I've never had anyone say that. But thank you very much. I really hope that this book, I'm sure it will do absolutely fantastically.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping that when you have visited the schools that you've gone to, they've been telling you the same thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is Amrita from the Voice It Out podcast, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode, because I definitely have enjoyed recording it. I just want to give a really big shout out to DJ Shy Guy, who composed our jingle, and we don't want to keep it in. We want to voice it out. Bye.